This is Faith.
And this is Addie.
From Mama Bear Connects. Today we are going to be just talking about mine and Addie's relationship and what makes things work the way that they do in our relationship. And yeah, so it's just going to be kind of a discussion between her and I and what we think works and what we think don't work and suggestions we might have for parents out there. So I want to start out with a quote from Brené Brown. My apologies for my first flub on her name. I honestly didn't know that it was a female, so I do apologize for that for those who caught my error at the beginning of our last podcast. But it is Brené Brown, and she has a awesome documentary on Netflix right now that I watched yesterday. So now I know who she is, and she is beautiful and amazing. So the quote that I want to share is, in order for connection to happen, we have to allow ourselves to be seen, really, truly, deeply seen. And that is by Brené Brown. So that quote really stood out to me because as you're raising children, communication and connection are like the top thing that make a relationship with your kid successful. And we have to allow our kids to see who we are vulnerably. We can't block ourselves off so the kids don't see us as people who are imperfect, because we are not perfect souls. So you have to allow, in my opinion anyways, you have to allow your kid to see you and for their friends to be able to see you so they can trust you, and allow them to know that if they need someone, that person will be here for them. And that person, as their parent, should be you. And same with kids. Like, if you don't allow yourself to be truly seen for who you are to your parent, you're not going to get the respect that you are hoping for, and you're not going to be seen for all that you are by your parents if you don't allow them in and allow for that connection to happen. So as a kid, and I talked about this in our 20 questions episode, I talked about wanting to be a parent my entire life. And like, from when I seriously was before kindergarten on, that was my biggest goal in life. And so I always observed the way parents parented. I always paid attention to how my parents raised me, how my friends' parents raised them, and I just kind of gauged from there how I wanted to be as a parent. And that is ultimately how I learned how to be the parent that I am today. And again, we're not professionals, just from our real life experience. So please keep that in mind as we're talking. So, Addie, what things do you feel like contribute to, like, why do you think you can come to me the way that you do?
I think I can trust you and talk to you about anything because you have told me that you are going to be there for me no matter what, and you've also proved it. And I have talked to you about everything, and you always help me figure things out and help me feel better about stuff I'm not so sure about. And you just proving that you're going to be there for me and helping me whenever I need it.
Do you have any suggestions for kids or parents?
Just if you don't have a great relationship with your kids, definitely try to build it up. And to build it up, just talk to them and figure out a way that you two, or more, not just two kids, or you and a parent, there's more than that, a way that what communication works best for you and what communication works best for your kid and how you can talk to them and how they react when you try to talk to them about things. Knowing the way they react is really important, and just showing that you're going to be there for them when they need anything from you will help you a lot.
Yeah. That's great. Do you do the same thing that I did as a kid? Do you observe other parenting styles?
Yes. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So with like between how Dad and I parent versus other parenting styles that you've seen, like, are you finding a middle ground that you want to enact? Will you go like more of what our style has been, or do you feel like there's like areas that you're going to improve on from us?
I think there's always room for improvement with everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you and Dad are great parents. I'm not saying that you're not, but I will definitely want to raise my kids the way you and Dad have raised Rylan and I. And I don't really know, like, on the spot what I would improve because you guys are awesome. So, but yeah, I think the way you're raised has a lot to do with how you will raise kids.
Mm-hmm.
If you are raised not in a healthy way, then you will either pick up those habits and treat your kids that way, or you'll learn from it and do the opposite of it and treat them freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And if you're raised in a good place, then you'll pick up on that and raise your kids that way. I think it's harder to veer off the wrong direction when you're raised in a good household.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. And it makes it, I think for you and Rylan, I think that like knowing our past and us being open about our past has helped you guys see that like making mistakes is just part of life. It's how you grow and learn. And for me, like, I'm a big perfectionist. I've always been a really big perfectionist. But I have just recently been working on perfectionism and allowing myself to be okay with mistakes and not beating myself up for quote unquote failures, because really no, like I haven't failed at anything. It's just like, what can I learn from it? And so that's been really hard for me to allow that like perfectionism to go to the wayside, because I want everything to like not be perfect, but so yeah, I just really I want my kids to understand that, like, no matter what, I always said to my kids all the time, if you're gonna do something right, you better do it right the first time, or else what's the point? Addie's looking at me like she's never heard me say that. I've always said it to Rylan, apparently. So that was kind of my view, like, why take the time to do something if you're not going to do it right, and or try hard to do it? And so that view has been very unhealthy for me, and so I'm working really hard to allow myself to be human and make mistakes and allow people to see the true me, including my children, because they're learning what they see through us as parents. And even if you're a grandparent listening to this, playing a parent role or there as just support to your grandkids, like, your kids see everything, and they can tell if you're being open and honest with them, I think. Like if you were like a crazy kid as a teenager and you're like, you're not good, and you're being all angry at your kids without explaining to them why you're worried about it. Like for me, I've had a lot of past with bad friends and things in my family personally that, like, I've dealt with drugs, I've dealt with alcoholism, I've dealt with things like that. And so for me, if I just kept getting mad at my kids saying you can't do that with no explanation, then they would not understand why I was getting so worried or frustrated. So
yeah, I also think it's important to what's the word? Judge the behavior, not the child.
Yes.
And don't get mad at them, get mad at the behavior and explain why it's wrong, because they're not a bad kid. It's just the decision they made that's not so great.
Yes. And that, like, you have to build your kids up with that. Like, that's one thing that I've always tried to say to our kids is, like, I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at what you did. Like, the choice that you made was dumb, not you. And so, yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I feel like that's so important because kids truly, like, they beat themselves up enough. Like, they don't need us as parents to beat them down. It says on here Wayne William Snellgrove, so I don't know if this is who created this quote, but it says, when you keep criticizing your kids, they don't stop loving you, they stop loving themselves. Let that sink in. And whether you're with your friend hanging out and having lunch and you're talking negatively about your kid, they feel that energy even if they're not by you. And just like if you were talking to a friend about your spouse or your partner or whoever, like, you want to talk to whoever about whoever the way that you would want them talking to somebody about you. And did that make sense? And so that, yeah, I really feel like that's so important. And the more you criticize your kid, whether to their face or behind their back, the less they'll love themselves. And that's not our jobs as parents. So, yeah, I really liked that. I'll have to share that on our Mama Bear Connects Instagram and Facebook. Gary Chapman, Addie had talked about the love languages 2 episodes ago.
Last episode? The bonus episode? Oh, wait.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was. But she had brought up the 5 love languages, and I highly suggest that you take time to listen to the book or read the book if you are not a reader. I don't love reading, so I listen to everything and I speed it up to make it even more interesting to listen to, because, yeah, I struggle with reading. I don't struggle with reading. I don't enjoy reading. Let's put it that way. So the 5 love languages that he goes over is receiving gifts, quality time, words of affirmation, acts of service or devotion, and physical touch. And being aware of that, if, you know, as you read the book and stuff, it really helps you to not only pinpoint what your love languages are, but areas for your spouse, for your children. And that way you can be the one who's filling your kids' tank and helping them to feel loved. For me personally, I love words of affirmation and quality time. And those are my 2 top ones. For Addie, it's quality time and physical touch.
I'd say physical touch and
then
gift giving.
Gift giving.
Yeah.
Interesting. That makes sense. Yeah, that does make sense. And then quality time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does make sense. Why do you feel like the gift giving is your secondary?
Because just being able to give something to someone makes me feel really good, and I don't know why, but giving things makes me feel loved. It's weird. But receiving gifts is not so much. I think that's my last one, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Because I really appreciate when I'm given a gift. Like, I love it. It's really kind.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't need gifts to feel loved.
So I wonder if that falls more into acts of service, like devotion, rather than like giving.
Yeah, I think, that.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew for sure physical touch.
Like, oh, yeah.
Addie loves her back scratched or just likes to snuggle. And she's been like that her entire life.
When I was younger, I'd scratch my own back and play with my hair until I fell asleep.
And then for our son, I think he is words of affirmation and I would say quality time or acts of service too.
Yeah.
And then my husband, I would say physical touch and quality time.
Yeah.
Are probably his two. And then acts of service and stuff. So anyways, this, the quality time, like whether it's your main love language or not, having good quality time with your kids is so important. And taking time, whether you have 1 kid or if you have 10 kids, like you have to make that effort and that time to spend with each individual child so that they feel individual. And as they get older, it seems like it's a lot harder to take that time because everybody's kind of going in different directions, adulting, and that's really hard. But definitely suggest reading or listening to Gary Chapman's 5 Love Languages. If you haven't already, it's fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to take a quick break for our sponsor, Anchor.fm. So give us a minute and we'll be right back. All right, we're back. So we're going to talk about the importance of individuality and allowing your kid to be their own individual. So Addie, go ahead and talk about what you were just mentioning about child development.
So in my child development class at school, it's very fun and I'm super excited because we get the robot babies.
Woo-hoo.
That's going to be great. I'm not going to sleep, that's for sure.
It's not terrible. I loved it.
Well, they have harder settings now. So that's great. So we were talking about how when you're raising a child, to support them to grow into their own individual person and do not try to force them to be something they're not, and don't try to make them a different person. Don't try to make them who you want them to be, because they're their own person and all you should be doing is help support them to grow into that person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not up to you for what they become. You can only influence them, but what they become is on them.
Yes. And that's really hard as a parent because you want your kid to be like the very best version of who you know they can be.
Mm-hmm.
And so when there are hardships or things that come up that are not what you envision as a parent, you have a really hard time not beating yourself up for that.
Yeah.
And but no, that's a good point, to allow them and support them to be their own individual person, because not one person is the same, and you can't expect your kids to reflect you exactly, or if you made a lot of mistakes as a kid, like pushing them in the direction that you wish that you would have gone in will just push them towards the direction you went in my opinion.
Yeah.
Just because your kid will feel suffocated. And the opposite is true too. Like if you don't ever show affection and love and care to your kid, they will eventually learn that you don't care about them.
Yeah.
And they will just cut you off completely. And it's really sad. We see this with some of Addie's friends that have had hard relationships with their parents, and it's really sad. It's heartbreaking that they can't go to their parents for stuff, and they don't care to go to their parents for stuff. And it's really, really heartbreaking. So you as a parent, you're an individual person, you're an individual soul, and you need to allow your kid to be that individual person themselves, although it is hard. And I will say we've been through a lot of situations where it's very easy to victimize myself and not beat myself up for hard stuff, whether it's with our son or our daughter. But ultimately I know that they can just feel the love and support from me, and it's their choices that they're gonna make, and I can only do as much as I can do. They have to do the rest on their own, which is really hard. And it's not an easy thing to do as a parent.
Yeah, I also think that this is kind of a different topic, but I personally really think that super strict parents make master liars and super sneaky kids. And you need to give your kid freedom, but not enough they will abuse that power, but not so much that saying, don't go to parties, don't do drugs, don't do alcohol, don't go out with friends at night, don't do alcohol, don't drink alcohol. Just being strict like that instead of saying stuff like, you can go to the party, just be back by this time, don't do any things you shouldn't be doing. Stuff like that. But if you are super strict with it, then they're gonna go off and be like, let's see what this does. Why are they so against it? And stuff like that. And they'll just learn how to get better and better at hiding it behind your back. So that also comes with trust and them being able to come to you. Because if they can't come to you and you're strict, then I guarantee they're doing stuff behind your back.
And that, like, even if your kid's not doing anything, but you're accusing them of doing things. I had a friend that she wasn't a bad kid. Like, she was really a good kid, and she would constantly be accused of lying or doing things and things like that. And she was not a bad kid. And eventually she just was like, well, they already think I'm doing it, so why not do it? And so she did fall into addiction and getting into drugs and stuff. And it was really unfortunate because her parents didn't see what an incredible soul she was, and they didn't value her for who she was. They just saw something in her that wasn't in her, and that pushed her that direction.
Yeah, and if you are constantly looking for the worst in your kids, they're gonna give you that worst. But if you are looking past because mistakes will be made, but if you're constantly bringing them up and shoving them in your child's face, it is not going to make them feel good, and they're not going to want to come to you. And so being supportive and kind to them, even if it's a bad situation, you still got to love them, because you may not like them at sometimes, but you always love them.
Yeah, and like we said at the beginning, it's the behavior that you really don't like, and And that is so important to differentiate and tell your kids, like, if you do have a drug or alcohol situation with your kids, I know where we live, drugs are very prominent in a lot of the schools. And like, if I don't talk to my kids about it, they're going to hear about it at school. They're going to talk about it at school. They're going to see it at school. I know for myself, I had a girl that had a whole bag of ecstasy in 9th grade, and she was offering me some, and that was a long time ago. And like, I thought that was bad then. And I mean, the kids now, I mean, and I'm sorry if this is triggering anybody, that's not our intent. Our intent is for parents and children alike to be aware that things are out there, and it doesn't matter if you hide it, if you don't want to talk about sex, if you don't want to talk about drugs, if you don't want to talk about alcohol. Like, your kids are going to talk about it anyways. They're going to figure it out. And if you don't give them that line of communication, they're not going to know that you know what you're talking about. They're not going to know that they can come to you with these problems. And that's where the problem lies. You can't just cover it up and hope that they never find out, because that's not how it works.
And if you don't talk to them, they're probably going to find out in a not so great way.
Yes.
Either personal experience or with friends, or just seeing it firsthand.
Yeah. Yep. And like pornography and that kind of stuff is all so available to kids. Like, you could Google old man and it will, like, if you're trying to do some documentary on a grandpa or something, and something inappropriate will pop up. And I mean, I'm guessing I haven't done it, but I'm just saying, like, you could be doing something innocent, like searching something innocent, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah, like swimsuit, and have something inappropriate come up. And so it's always there, and that falls into like how you portray yourself as a parent, whether you're a father or a mother. Like, the way that you hold yourself around your kids, like with your confidence, is what your kids will ultimately mimic and see in themselves. And so holding your self-value high, whether you do or don't feel that way for real, making sure that your kids see confidence in you is important, because that's where they learn how to hold confidence in themselves. And I feel like that's very important. Overall, really, like, it just comes down to communication, being willing to open up, be vulnerable with your kids.
Present.
Yes, be present, put your phones down. If your kid's trying to talk to you about something, like, even holding your phone shows that you don't care. Like, put your phone down. Were you gonna say something?
I was just gonna say that even if you do care about what they're saying, but you're holding your phone, then they'll get the impression that you don't.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not what you want to give anybody that you love and care about, whether it's your child or your spouse or partner, whoever, parent. Like, you don't want to portray that. You don't want to be like, I don't care about you. I'm going to sit here and hopefully I get another message on my phone to distract me from what you're telling me. And that is not okay. So, yeah, it just really, mine and Addie's relationship and mine and my son's relationship has come down to communication. And it's been a lot harder with my son, just because he's been through, I think, both my kids have been through a lot, but Rylan went through a lot very young.
Yeah.
And so I think he's more guarded in communication and things like that. And so Addie has just been more open and more willing to talk about things. But either way, like knowing that our kids can come to us and talk to us about anything has been ultimately like the most important thing for me. And I think that's how we've been able to have such a successful relationship with our kids. And really, like, we have our issues and we're still learning. We are not perfect parents by any sense of the word.
Nobody's a perfect parent.
No, like, I don't think that will ever be achieved, but we do the best that we can. And if there is mistakes made, or if there are things said that was a mistake or done that was a mistake, like owning up to it as a parent to your kid and being like, you know, I was in the wrong for saying that, or I was in the wrong for doing that. Like, we make mistakes, and if you can't apologize to your kid, then one, they figure that they're not worth an apology, and two, like, they're gonna learn that they don't have to apologize when they're being rude. And
or they'll think that's the way they should be treated.
Yes, and
that's the way they'll treat others.
Yep. Yeah. And along with that, like, the way that you are in your relationships, that's how your kids start to see as they start getting older and getting interested in being in relationships. Like, that's what they see. Like, if you're treating your spouse rudely, or I don't know, just not being supportive or whatever in any sense of the word, that's how your kids are going to think that they are supposed to treat their partners in relationships, or vice versa. That's how they're supposed to be treated. And like, if you are in a position right now where you don't love the relationship that you're in, or you don't love the way that you're treating someone, like, reevaluate it and see what it's really doing for you and for your children, because that's how they're gonna learn to be treated and talked to and stuff. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's
a little rundown.
Yeah.
On how to maintain a good relationship.
And how we've managed to maintain ours.
Yeah, and also it's very important to have fun.
Yes.
And goofy.
If you guys haven't caught on yet, Addie and I are all about fun.
Mm-hmm.
We love to have fun. So take time to crank up some music and dance around. And also another really great book that I love it's called The Child Whisperer by Carol Tuttle. And she goes into energy typing and finding out what energy type your kids are is huge to honor them and who they truly are. So if your kid's a goofy soul like Addie, like, playing and goofing around and being happy and stuff is very important to her. And and so I found that I'm that same type, which I didn't realize for a few years, but now I own it and I live it, and I try to be goofy and bubbly and fun. So that is another book that I highly recommend, and I'll post that on the social media for everybody. But yeah, so I think we're gonna wrap it up for tonight. Thank you guys so much for listening to us, supporting us. Please continue to share with your friends and family so that we can continue to grow. We appreciate everybody.
You're awesome.
So much. And look forward to our next podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Have a great night, everybody, or day. See ya.
Or morning.
Or morning.
Bye.
See you guys.